Did you know that most motorcycle mechanics would never buy the majority of cheap bikes you see on the street? At first glance, they all look fine. Shiny plastics, flashy colors, easy financing, well-staged photos in the ads. But behind those deals are models that seem cheap at first, and then turn into money-eating machines, in parts, labor, and wasted time at the shop. While you're excited thinking, finally, I'll have my bike, the mechanic seeing it roll into the bay for the third time this month already knows that purchase wasn't a bargain. It was a trap. And here's the thing, the real cost of a motorcycle isn't on the price tag. It's in those days you lose waiting for a part nobody has. In those extra expenses you didn't factor in showing up late to work because the bike wouldn't start. It's in missing that weekend trip because something broke Friday afternoon. That's why in this video, we're not talking about the prettiest bike or the one with the biggest screen or the one in the flashiest commercials. Today we're talking about something far more important for anyone watching: their wallet. 4 cheap motorcycles that mechanics actually recommend. 4 models that have already passed the test of daily use, city abuse, potholes, traffic, rain, and owners who sometimes forget about maintenance. Stay until the end, because bike number 1 is the one most people underestimate for being simple. But that simplicity is precisely what makes it the shop favorite. Let's get started. Let's start with the most controversial pick of all: the Kawasaki Z125 Pro. In forums, you'll easily find people saying, "Too small, it's just a toy, why even bother?" They laugh at the displacement or just repeat what they've heard. But when you talk to mechanics who work every day with delivery riders, with people who make their living on a bike, things look very different. The Z125 doesn't pretend to be a luxury bike or a machine to show off. It's a work tool. If it were a person, it would be that coworker who doesn't wear designer clothes, doesn't show off a fancy car, but shows up on time every single day, does the job, and when there's overtime, stays without complaining. The Z125's engine is a 125 cubic centimeters single-cylinder 4-stroke, incredibly basic, and derived from platforms Kawasaki has refined over decades. And here's what's interesting. When something is produced in such massive quantities, parts and technical knowledge become incredibly accessible. That has a huge advantage. There's no mystery. Any neighborhood shop has already seen dozens of identical engines. Mechanics know how to tear it down, replace what needs replacing, and get it running without needing complicated manuals or special tools that cost a fortune. Parts are cheap and abundant. Clutch plates, brake pads, chains, filters, even complete engines can be found at prices that simply don't exist for European bikes. A set of brake pads that might cost you $40 to $70 on a premium bike? For the Z125, you'll find options from $15 to $25 that do the job perfectly well. An OEM chain for a premium brand can run $120 to $180. For the Z125, you'll find options from $35 that work just fine. Let's talk real numbers. Many delivery riders who use the Z125 daily report covering between 50 and 75 miles per day. In 3 years of constant use, the bike can reach 50,000 to 60,000 miles without major issues. During that time, besides basic maintenance every 600 miles, they only need to replace normal wear items: tires, chains, brakes, battery, and maybe the rectifier. Obviously, not everything is perfect. The plastics age faster, especially if you leave it in the sun all day without a cover. The hardware can rust over time if you live in a coastal area or it rains a lot. The ignition switch is known to fail after many cycles. The suspension is basic and transmits road bumps pretty directly. And at high RPMs, it vibrates more than a Japanese premium bike. That's undeniable, but for someone on a tight budget who needs a bike right now to start working, many mechanics are clear. If you can't afford a Honda Grom or a Yamaha MT03, start with a Z125, but do the services on time. That's the key. A Z125 that's been neglected, with no oil changes, no air filter, nothing, will destroy itself like any other bike. But a Z125 cared for with the basics can accompany you for years as an honest tool that does the job without showing off. And there's something else many don't consider. Kawasaki's dealer network is huge. There are dealerships practically in every major city and many mid-sized towns. That means if something fails on the road, you're not alone. You can find help relatively close by. From there, we move to a bike that has earned massive respect in the streets, the Honda CB300F. This bike is like that grandfather who looks fragile but has been getting up early and working without complaining for 20 years. We've all seen an old CB300F. Sun-faded paint, patched, seat, rusty exhaust, stickers from all over stuck on the tank, handlebars slightly bent from some ancient drop. And yet you turn the key, give the choke a little pull, hit the starter button, and the bike wakes up like saying, "Another day of work. Let's go." The secret of the CB300F is in its almost philosophical simplicity. Its engine is a single-cylinder four-stroke with fuel injection and liquid cooling. Nothing overly complicated that needs dealership-only diagnosis software when it fails. No exotic oxygen sensors or temperature sensors that cost $200 each. No control modules worth half what the whole bike is worth. Mechanically, it's so simple that many shops recommend it as a training bike for anyone wanting to learn maintenance. Change oil, adjust valve clearances, change spark plug, tension the chain, check brakes. It's a bike where practically everything is accessible and logical. If something fails, it's easy to follow the problem's path without needing to plug in a scanner or have advanced electronics knowledge. The steel frame is solid. The transmission is direct and simple, and every component seems designed to be repaired rather than replaced. The stories mechanics tell are always similar. CB300Fs with 40,000, 50,000, or even 60,000 miles still in service, because the owner has at least done oil changes and replaced wear parts when needed. There are almost mythical stories. The CB300F of the mail carrier who's been doing his route with the same bike for 10 years. The CB300F of the guy who sells breakfast burritos and leaves at 5 a.m. every day for the last decade. The CB300F, the college student inherited from his dad and still uses without major problems. Parts aren't just cheap, they're so common that you can often get the generic part at any parts store, even in small towns. A complete piston with rings runs $60 to $90. A valve set, if you ever need to replace them, is around $45. The throttle body, if you decide to buy a new one instead of cleaning what you have, can be found from $75 for the generic version to $150 for OEM. And most of the time, you don't even need the OEM, because the generic works perfectly. The same goes for fuel consumption. If you ride it calmly, respecting traffic lights, and not accelerating like you're about to take off, it's not unusual to see 70 to 80 miles per gallon. What does that mean in real life? If you use it for work or to go to school every day, at the end of the month, you're going to notice the difference in your wallet. If you do about 25 miles daily, Monday through Friday, we're talking about 500 miles a month. With fuel economy of 75 miles per gallon, you consume approximately 6.7 gallons per month. At average gas prices, the savings compared to a less efficient bike is notable. Of course, it's not the bike for racing or showing off at a track. The CB300F isn't made for that. It's a calm-paced bike for the city, for reasonable trips, for that user who values arriving consistently over arriving fast. Real top speed is around 85 to 90 miles per hour downhill with wind at your back. On steep climbs with weight, you can feel it lacks power. Braking is basic with a drum in the rear and disc up front on newer versions. The suspension is firm and transmits bumps pretty directly. But there's something that compensates for all that. The mental peace of knowing your bike will start, that it won't leave you stranded, that when something fails, you'll be able to fix it without selling a kidney. Many mechanics sum it up like this: it's not the prettiest, but it's one of the longest lasting. And when someone who makes a living repairing bikes says that, it's worth listening. Moving up one step in perceived quality, we arrive at one of the queens of the budget segment, the Yamaha MT03. If you ask a shop with years of experience what small bike almost never comes in except for services, the answer that gets repeated most often is exactly that: the MT03. Its engine, a 321 cubic centimeters, parallel twin, liquid-cooled four-stroke, is the definition of a proven motor. Yamaha didn't try to invent anything weird here. On the contrary, they bet on a classic, robust, and extremely reliable design that has worked for decades. The MT03's engine architecture has been refined since the early 2000s. It's a block Yamaha has produced by the millions in different markets. Latin America, Asia, Europe. That maturity in design means all potential problems were already found and solved years ago. You're not buying an experimental engine or new technology. You're buying something that's already proven to work in extreme conditions in every corner of the planet. In day-to-day use, that translates to something very simple. The MT03 almost never enters the shop for serious problems. The normal thing is to see it come in for a scheduled oil change every 4,000 miles, brake inspection every 6 months, tire change when they reach the wear limit, maybe a valve adjustment every 12,000 miles, according to the manual. When an MT03 shows up with a truly damaged engine, the typical mechanic phrase is, "This didn't break on its own. There was severe neglect here." In other words, for an MT03 to really complain, the owner has to have mistreated it badly, forgetting about oil for months, running with an overheating engine, ignoring the signs, using bad quality oil or even car oil, thinking it's the same thing. Another point in its favor is Yamaha's network. OEM parts are available without too much drama in mid-sized and large cities. And there are also many good quality generic options, because the platform is so popular that multiple manufacturers produce compatible parts. That keeps maintenance costs reasonable without sacrificing quality. An OEM oil filter runs $12 to $15. Generic is $6 to $8. Semi-synthetic quality oil for the service. You need about 2 quarts that cost you between $18 and $28 total. And in fuel consumption, the MT03 is still playing in the first division. 55 to 65 miles per gallon are totally achievable figures if you don't push it to the limit all the time. There are users who report even 65 to 70 miles per gallon on calm highway trips. In the city, with heavy traffic and stoplights, the average drops to about 50 to 55 miles per gallon, which is still excellent for the category. It's a bike that works very well for someone doing city commuting every day, for the delivery rider who wants something nicer than a basic Chinese bike but can't pay for a big bike, for the student who wants to start with something reliable and easy to handle, for the worker who needs to move 20 to 30 miles daily between home and work. Ergonomics is another detail people underestimate until they spend several hours on an uncomfortable bike, but mechanics see it because they talk to tired users. The MT03 isn't very tall. The seat is about 30.7 inches off the ground, which allows people of short or medium height to plant their feet well. The riding position is neutral, not leaning forward like a sport bike, not upright like a cruiser. You can be on it for a long time without ending up wrecked with back pain. That reduces fatigue and with it, riding errors. Weight also plays in its favor. With a full tank, it's around 370 pounds, which makes it very manageable in heavy traffic, easy to squeeze between cars, simple to lift if it falls, or to maneuver in tight spaces. For someone who's never ridden a motorcycle, the MT03 is an excellent first bike, because it's not intimidating and forgives many beginner mistakes. Many shops tell the same anecdote. The mechanic who repairs everything, from cheap Chinese bikes to expensive European bikes. But when he buys a bike for his personal use, he ends up with a used MT03. Why? Because he knows exactly what to expect. Oil changes every 4,000 miles. Check brakes periodically, tension the chain, and little more. That says a lot more than any advertisement. And now, we arrive at number 1, the one many consider the queen of hard work in the budget segment, the Honda CRF300L. This bike is the definition of, I don't care about the road, I'll get through. If the others on the list are designed mainly for the city and good asphalt, the CRF is designed precisely for the opposite. Giant potholes, loose gravel with rocks, Broken roads where asphalt is more a memory than a reality. Streets full of speed bumps and reducers, torrential rain, mud, rocks, sand. It's the bike you find in remote towns, on ranches, at construction sites, in the hands of people who absolutely need to get to places where a scooter simply won't survive. The heart of the CRF is an engine that comes from a long tradition of Honda Enduro and dual sport bikes. Honda has been building CRF-type bikes in different displacements for decades, and that competition DNA filtered down to these small bikes that inherit technology proven in extreme conditions. They're simple, strong, low-compression blocks, very tolerant of bad gasoline and rough use. The engine has a moderate compression ratio that allows it to run well, even with questionable quality gasoline, something fundamental in rural areas. The chassis suspension combination is also designed from the ground up to suffer. Good travel fork up front, monoshock in the rear, structure capable of carrying weight and withstanding strong impacts without bending at the first hit. The telescopic front fork has good travel, generally between 10 and 10.6 inches. That means it can absorb hard hits without the impact reaching straight to your hands. In the rear, it has a monoshock with generous travel as well. The tires are 21-inch front and 18-inch rear with high profile, designed for mixed roads. Ground clearance is approximately 10.4 to 11 inches, much more than any conventional urban bike. That allows you to pass over high-speed bumps, deep potholes, big rocks in the road, ditches, without hitting the crankcase or exhaust. The exhaust is positioned high and tucked to the right side of the bike, precisely to avoid hitting it on obstacles. Mechanics working in rural areas tell very similar stories. CRFs with 50,000, 60,000, even 75,000 miles, still in daily use, often with owners who've only worried about changing oil, brakes, and tires. It's not magic, it's design meant to last. Honda applied here the same principle as in their electric generators. Over-engineer key components, so they always work below their stress limit. In practice, the CRF becomes the #1 recommendation when someone walks into the shop and says something like, "I live where the streets are a disaster. I need to mix highway with dirt roads, or I need a bike to go to the country and come back loaded." Yes, a CRF costs more than an urban 125, but that's exactly why many mechanics see it as an investment, not an expense. The logic is simple. You pay more today, but you pay less in headaches over the next few years. Fuel consumption, being a dual sport, is surprisingly good. It's not as extreme as a city 125, but moving between 60 and 73 miles per gallon is totally possible if you don't push it hard all the time. On calm highway at moderate speed, some users report even 70 to 75 miles per gallon. In the city with heavy traffic, it drops to about 55 to 60 miles per gallon. The seat is higher, the position is more commanding, you see traffic and obstacles better, and the bike lets you play with dirt roads without feeling like you're going to break it at the first pothole. For someone who wants one bike for everything, city during the week, and light adventure on weekends, the CRF fits perfectly. It's not as extreme as a pure competition enduro that would be uncomfortable in the city, but it's also not as limited as an urban bike that falls short as soon as you leave the pavement. When you ask mechanics why they recommend the CRF so much, the answer usually comes down to this: because it comes in, gets its service, and leaves. It doesn't move in here. And that, said from a shop, is probably the best compliment a budget motorcycle can receive. In a world where many brands fill their spec sheets with riding modes, connectivity, and gadgets, the CRF wins by something much simpler. It starts every day, takes you where you need to go, and rarely betrays you. In summary, if you're looking for a cheap motorcycle, but don't want to make the shop your second home, there are 4 names you should have burned into your memory. Kawasaki Z125 Pro, if you're starting with a very tight budget and commit to doing the maintenance. Honda CB300F, if you want a classic, simple, fuel-efficient bike that's easy to repair. Yamaha MT03, if you're looking for balance, smoothness, and one of the best reliability reputations in the category. And Honda CRF300L, if your thing is ugly roads, mixing asphalt with dirt, and needing a companion that will withstand years of battle. These aren't the only good bikes on the market, but they are among the favorites of those who see them day after day in the shop bay and know better than anyone which models come in just for an oil change and which ones come in on a tow truck. So, before you let yourself be seduced by bright colors and zero-down financing offers, do one simple but effective thing. Go to 3 or 4 shops in your area. Talk to the mechanics when they're not busy. Ask them which bikes they see least often with serious problems. And after hearing the same answers repeated in different places, you'll have a much clearer idea of what to buy. Because in the end, nobody knows motorcycles better than the person who has to repair them every single day. If you found this useful, subscribe to Bike Nexus and hit that bell. We talk straight about bikes for people who actually ride them. Drop a comment with your experiences with these bikes, and I'll see you in the next one.